Hello and welcome to Bernama World on Bernama TV. World Refugee Day honors the strength of millions forced to flee conflict and persecution. In Malaysia, nearly 200,000 refugees face daily struggles, including legal uncertainty and limited access to work, healthcare and education. Despite not ratifying the 1951 Refugee Convention, Malaysia has launched pilot work programs for Rohingya refugees alongside community projects with UNHCR. Of course, joining me in the studio is LOUISE AUBIN, representative of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, or UNHCR Malaysia, and Ms. HEBA ABDELLATIF, Chief of Mission, International Organization of Migration, better known as IOM in Malaysia. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us. Of course, we hope to give some information today. We hope to also create some awareness and also narrative or conversations that we have. How can we change? Sometimes we say we have conversations, but we really don't understand what we're saying when we talk about migrants. You know, they've got different names for it. Some are very derogatory, and I'm not going to use them on live TV. But I'd like to begin here. Give us a snapshot of the current refugee situation in Malaysia for those that are unfamiliar. Just give us a brief on what UNHCR is and IOM's roles, or these two organizations and their roles. Maybe I'll start with you, Luz. Yeah.
Thank you, Gerard. You know, every year around June 20th, we celebrate World Refugee Day. It's less of a celebration this year, I'll be very honest. I think faced with the number of refugees, and recently UNHCR came out with the latest global statistics, and if anyone has been paying attention, and if it's been widely covered in media, we've never had so many people forcibly displaced due to conflict and persecution around the world. Most of them actually never make it across the border out of their own country to seek safety or refuge. 143 million forcibly displaced. 40 million of them have been able to cross the border into some kind of protection or asylum. Here in Malaysia, you've rightly pointed out, we have 200,000 registered refugees with UNHCR. Now the main difference between refugees and migrants, refugees don't choose. They are compelled to flee because of conflict, massive violation, discrimination, persecution, and they don't necessarily choose to come to Malaysia. They're seeking protection. And so the main thing that distinguishes refugees from migrants, we owe them one essential protection, and it is protecting them from a forcible return to danger. We protect them while they are here until such time as peace resumes and they can go back home.
HEBA, your thoughts?
I agree completely with Louise. Thank you, first of all, for having us here. The International Organization for Migration, I mean, we're the UN agency for migration, so we look at the broader picture of human mobility, but definitely with a specific focus on refugees here today. Under the Global Compact on Migration, we look at inclusive health services and inclusive education and workforce. This is key to support what Louise exactly was saying, the protection of the refugees, especially as we are here in the context of Malaysia.
Mm-hmm. Now, coming back to you, Louise, refugees in Malaysia face legal and financial barriers to public health care. In your opinion, what are the biggest challenges in ensuring refugees can access basic and essential health services here, or essential services? Yeah.
Well, it's good to you underscore essential. It is such a fundamental right to be able to exercise some form of access to basic health care. And this doesn't change whether you're a refugee, a migrant, a national, and it's in the interest of Malaysia to ensure that basic health care is accessible. Now, the problem with refugees is there's a legal vacuum here in Malaysia where their legal status is not defined. So refugees often don't have the requisite identity documents recognized by hospitals. So problem number one. Problem number two, while there's been quite a bit of an effort on the part of government to ensure that refugees don't pay the top rate of foreigners here in Malaysia to access public hospitals, 50% of that cost is still an inordinate cost. For refugees, why? Because they're unable to work legally. So if you don't have a source of income and you have essential needs for health coverage, and I speak here of like children and vaccination. It's so essential that all children be vaccinated, not just part of children to be vaccinated. Maternal health concerns refugees as much as nationals, Malaysians. So it is important that we now broaden the access, a more easy access to something so essential as healthcare. We've made a few steps. Together with the private sector, we've been able to set up some kind of health coverage through a system that we called Remedy. So together with Alliance, for example, so refugees are able to contribute something as a health insurance coverage. And that shows that where there's a will, there's a way. There are partnerships out there that are able to complement and fill a gap where there is a gap. And so we depend a lot on these innovative ways of ensuring the basic rights or basic services are afforded to refugees who we need to protect.
Let's go back to IOM now. And apparently IOM plays a key role in addressing the health and mobility needs of migrants and displaced communities. Maybe give us a bit of a brief on IOM's role in Malaysia, and from that lens, how to ensure migrants and undocumented populations are not left behind in national or regional health strategies.
Well, the most important thing here for IOM is referrals and partnerships. We identify health service providers, NGOs, partners that we can work with to refer cases where where there is a need for health. For example, and also going back to the issue of the benefit of all for health services, is the issue of the benefit to the host communities. For example, during COVID-19, IOM worked with the migrants and refugee communities to raise awareness on the benefits of the vaccine, on COVID-19 vaccine. And that is an overall kind of support to the idea of benefiting the host communities and the government. Of course, there will be more work, and there is more work on the policy angle of it from a regional perspective, but that is something that we're looking at right now.
Louise, let's just go back to what you were talking about just now, that initiative which involves Allianz. Just give us a better explanation about that. And you said those who are involved in the program or refugees have to sort of put out a little something towards the program. Should they be, given where they are and the problems they face on a daily basis, should we even bother taking a little something from them?
I think it goes to human nature. Even refugees who are so in need of some of the essentials want to be able to contribute. This private insurance scheme, while not always addressing all the needs of refugees, it is a bit of a mirror to how it is that we're supposed to be working together in society. HEBA mentioned, this partnership that UNHCR has with IOM. We need all our partners to be able to address some of the essentials. Protection takes many forms. Refugees who flee conflict can sometimes be injured. Refugees who have suffered persecution are sometimes suffering from trauma. These are essential services, some of them quite specific, that need to be offered if we want to ensure that refugees end up resuming more of a normal life, even though they're in displacement. So we have partnerships with the private sector, which is very vibrant here in Malaysia. Communities are very active in supporting refugees, including in the health sector. We have a network of medical people who offer freely services to refugees. So that's how we're able to go ahead. In the absence of a law, we have to be doing this quite creatively. If a law were to be enacted recognizing the legal status of refugees, probably some of these essential services would also take shape in a more organized fashion.
So where we are right now, I'm looking at all these questions here, and I'm trying to wrap my head around the concept of giving out a lot of information. But I guess from the standpoint of us lay people, understanding what the situation in Malaysia is really important, simplifying it for us. Now, with regards to having conversations, there's a gray area about having conversations with regards to refugees and migrants and how we talk about it, so on and so forth, what we can talk about. What are some of our problems within the region at this point? Let's not just talk about Malaysia. Let's just look at the region. What is your opinion on how we're having conversations about migrants, refugees, and and how we're dealing with these problems on a daily basis in the region?
From our perspective, I think the issue is to look at it from a positive angle. What are the socioeconomic and cultural benefits of migrants and refugees within a country? Trying to see the value added of having migrants and refugees, whether it's from an economic perspective, whether it's from a cultural perspective. Migration is a big issue in the region, and we cannot say it doesn't exist, but we have to see how can we take the positives from it. What benefits, what skills do they bring, what languages do they bring, what food sometimes do they bring to our culture. Simple things that we need to look at and not look at them as a burden, but look at them as a positive and added value to the communities they live in. This, I think, would be a major step for looking at migration and migrants and refugees.
So if we look at this problem the world over, and there are dynamics in different continents of the world with regards to migration, refugees and migrants. If there's one best model we can learn from in order to protect their rights, in order to make sure they're treated like human beings and not cockroaches, where do we start looking at first?
There's a ready-made model.
And I'm sorry I'm not following the questions yet.
That's all right, because I think it makes it much more honest and relevant question for your viewers. There's a ready-made model. It's called the 1951 Convention on the Status of Refugees. Now, this convention is actually signed by a wide number. In fact, it's one of the most ratified conventions in the world. It stipulates what is a refugee, so there's a definition, and the rights and obligations that flow from that status. So rights and obligations go both ways, both for countries.
So can we backtrack? You said it's one of the most widely ratified
conventions in the world.
So what does this mean for the layperson?
It means that most countries in the world have signed on to this convention. It's a convention that seeks to protect refugees and at the same time tries to explain to countries, then what does that mean? When refugees come to your country, what actually should be happening? Well, one, you should be identifying who's a refugee, because some refugees may come, they're fleeing, so they may not have the documents necessary, like a visa, to be able to enter the country. Yeah. Should they be penalized for that? Well, if they're refugees, no. So for example, question number one, are refugees illegal migrants? Well, in law, no. It's the absence of a domestic law, it's the absence of a law in Malaysia defining who is a refugee and therefore what are the rights in Malaysia that has generated this idea that they're illegal migrants, they didn't come with a necessary visa, etc. But under international law, what most countries are doing, they're allowing refugees to enter because they're fleeing. Now, once they enter, it is important to identify who is a refugee, who may be some other kind of migrant. And why is it important to identify who is a refugee? Because, like I said, I owe that person one major thing. I owe that person protection. I will make sure that that person isn't returned to danger. While the person is here, I've talked about the number of refugees. Year in and year out, we talk about a growing number of refugees. Why? Because conflicts are not being solved. Wars, on average today, last 30 years. That means with all the diplomacy and everything that we're putting into this, we don't seem to be able to address the root causes.
Right, let's come back to you. Would you like to add to what she's saying?
Maybe just to add that the importance here is to look at it also from a regional perspective. I think pointing out one country within migration in general is very difficult. Migration is cross-border by definition, and looking at the importance of data and finding the right information and being able to have policies based on up-to-date data and research for us I think is key to be able to inform policies and application and implementation of legislation.
So what can be done at this point? So let's just say if we want to have a conversation on this, and it's hard to have a conversation on some media channels with regards to what the situation is and how people are being treated, so on and so on. So how can we, like you said, find the positives in this in order to work around this whole public diplomacy that we have and make sure we get some things going, at least conversations going for the awareness of the general public? I think if there's more awareness with the general public, and as cliche as it sounds, there'll be more of a buy-in. People will understand more. And I don't think, and this is my personal opinion, I think there's very little information on the ground, to a school-going teenager. What do they care about migrants or refugees? Because they don't learn much about it.
Mm-hmm. When I said 200,000 refugees are registered with UNHCR, 90% of them come from Myanmar. That proves the point. Refugees are fleeing conflict. That is, and persecution. That is the crux of it. So it explains why most of the refugees here in Malaysia come from a country at war. Malaysia is doing great things, one through its leadership in ASEAN, and we've heard a lot about this, and it's drawing attention to what's going on in Myanmar, so that more than Malaysia, a whole international community can weigh in and start addressing with Myanmar what are the root causes. What is causing people to flee? Violence? What is causing people to flee? Exclusion? Some minority groups are being discriminated against. That conversation is ongoing. More close to home, Malaysia is also on a very interesting track, trying to devise some kind of legal framework to put some order into exactly the elements that you've been raising, Gerard. Who is a refugee? What rights do they have? How can we enable access to some basic things like children needing to be in school, mothers being able to access maternal health services, so how
difficult is it to put a framework together with regards to this? Is it a tough thing? Are there a lot of different areas that need to be taken into consideration before we put a framework together?
I think the intention is there, and secondly, I think it does take a bit of coordination. You need to make sure you're not devising a parallel set of rules for people. They need to be integrated, the rules need to be integrated into your existing legal framework. So the Immigration Act, instead of being silent on refugees, would include a chapter on refugees and how we deal with refugees. The Ministry of Education would consider refugee children when planning how many teachers to have in schools, etc. Same thing for health. In the work sector, and HEBA is very well placed to speak about this, it's how do you articulate, the needs in your different sectors to accommodate for a ready-made skilled and unskilled group of people who want to contribute during the time that they're here. Because let's remember, Gerard, most refugees want to go back home. We just need to ensure that they can do so safely.
HEBA?
Yes, legal pathways is one of the issues I think that we're looking at now, and this is trying to look at how we can benefit from the skills and the trainings of refugees and migrants to work within the community they're in, but also, as Louise said, to prepare them for either going home or to be resettled to a third country. So focusing on education, training, and so on is very important to ensure that they continue to be viable participants in the societies they live in.
So I think for bringing it back home to Malaysia, and we've got about 6 minutes left, Malaysia chairs ASEAN this year, and we are trying to do work in many different areas in order to see ASEAN move forward as a bloc. Now, in your opinion, what should policymakers know with regards to what they can do? And another cliche I'm going to use, which is low-hanging fruits. What can be done immediately as Malaysia sits on the chair to push this forward a little bit before the next country takes over for the chair of ASEAN?
Collaboration in the sub-region, given the reality of Myanmar, which is the main problem here with regard to forced population displacements. For as long as the levels of violence continue in Myanmar, we can expect people having to flee and extract themselves from harm's way. Collaboration between the countries who could be hosting refugees safely when a boat arrives, that there's safe disembarkation, that we agree among countries, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, and others, how do we deal with refugees in an equitable way, ensuring that everyone shares the burden of hosting, but also is able to give back in terms of the reality. The second thing might be to lead by example as well. Malaysia is well advanced. Other countries are also thinking of a legal framework to make sure that there are no imbalances of treatment between countries when we deal with refugees. And thirdly, working on that one essential solution, it is the safe way back home. In the meantime, other countries are weighing in. HEBA mentioned resettlement. There's sometimes, I think, an inordinate expectation on resettling refugees elsewhere, and that comes from, you know, a model you know well since the 70s with the Indo-Chinese refugee crisis, where most, if not all, of the refugees were resettled elsewhere. The world has changed since. The number of crises have grown, and the number of places that resettlement countries offer to refugees has dwindled down to 1% of the number of refugees worldwide. So we need to be thinking of solutions more regionally, and in the meantime, ensuring that refugees have the basic means of survival.
So it's interesting that we're in a time when we can amplify anything, given that you just have a device of some nature, and you don't have to be a cameraman, you don't have to be working in media. But I guess that the bigger problem here is that there's a lot of information out there, but everyone's talking over each other at this point. I don't know how you're going to weigh in. Everyone speaks over each other. Is anyone getting how difficult the situation is? Yeah, if you haven't been a refugee, or if you haven't come from a community which suffers, or if you never came from a minority, you probably will not understand this. So how do we now create an awareness of some sort at this point? What would be your messages to Malaysia with regards to this? What's the one thing you want to take with both of you? Let's start with you, HEBA.
I would look at migration governance as a whole and try to focus on what is a tailored approach to Malaysia. What do we need? Look at every aspect and try to come up with realistic solutions, whether it's for refugees, whether it's for migrants, on all the different sectors. Migration governance is quite broad, but it has to be government-led, and it has to be based on the needs on the ground.
Right.
The second very important thing is sharing best practices. There are specific best practices across the globe, and trying to bring them in and using them to build your own tailored migration governance policies, that I think would be key to supporting and moving forward on this issue, including awareness raising, which you have raised, because awareness raising is key, and even simple things like terminology and words we use that can deflect sometimes from the benefits that we see from the work that is already being done on the ground.
Mm-hmm. So if you have to speak to all Malaysians now, what would your message be to all Malaysians?
Look into it, yeah. Take a deeper look at it from a humanity perspective, and try to see how you can find a way to be inclusive, whether it's short-term or long-term, for migrants and refugees in your society.
Louise?
I'm not suggesting that any one of your viewers is responsible for solving world peace, but I would say get involved. Refugees are across Peninsula Malaysia. They're in.
But doesn't it take the collective? You know, I mean, we're not responsible, but we're responsible for those little conversations we have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it starts with you and me having this conversation. Yeah. And the interesting questions you've been asking. Why? To get to understand, why are refugees here? What do they need? And how can they make their way back home, which is what they want. And I think that conversation just in and of itself prompts people to say, you know what? Let me get to know refugees. They are here. They're among us. Get to know their plight. You'll have an inordinate amount of respect for what they've been through, and this will probably generate some very tangible things for you to do. Get involved with your community. Give a bit of money. Right. Give some services to refugees. Give them space, a bit of time.
Right. It's about time we wrap. And very quickly, if you can speak in my good ear, just to reiterate what policymakers need to know at this point, maybe in the next 1 minute, what you want policymakers in Malaysia to know about World Refugee Day 2025.
Refugees are compelled to flee. They didn't choose to be here, but while they're here, they want to contribute. And there are great programs, partnerships. A lot of people want to get involved. We can get them something to do to contribute to the society. It would be to work. It would be for their children to be safely in school, to learn something while they get their lives back together. And I think that would make for a
30 seconds, HEBA, you're going to wrap this up. Yeah.
Migration is a journey. Every step counts, and we have to support them throughout and make sure that their needs and protection needs are fulfilled, and the benefits, again, as I say, to all, including the host community, are preserved.
Ladies, thank you so much for taking time off your busy schedules to be with us right here in the studios of Bernama. Ms. LOUISE AUBIN, representative of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, or UNHCR Malaysia, and Ms. HEBA ABDELLATIF, Chief of Mission, International Organization of Migration, IOM, in Malaysia. With that, that's a wrap from us here at Bernama World. The only thing I can say at this point is, if you don't know anything about World Refugee Day, just go Google it at this point. Maybe go to YouTube and look at some shorts there, and you'll see some really horrible and terrifying stories. And I hope that this opens your eyes a little bit to understanding the situation of migrants and refugees within our country. I'm GERARD, RATNAM, signing out. Stay with us right here on Bernama TV for more news updates. Bye-bye.